Hi everybody, this is Matthew Poes of Poes Acoustics, and I decided to take a video while I'm recalibrating my system. So I made some changes to the system. I had to change out one of the subwoofer amps. I put in an extra set of tops and actually changed them out from the RBHs I had to matching Perlisten S3 ICs. So I have waveforming in this room, and I thought maybe you guys would find it helpful to see how I do the basic waveforming calibration. So the first thing everybody knows, this is what you do when you do a Trinnov calibration, is you have to get the microphone in the RSP, and you need to place the microphone basically right in the middle of the main listening position, as centered as possible, aim directly at the center channel speaker. So this has like a aiming direction to it. It's really critical. And it needs to be level. So what you do is you use this as a high precision bubble level. It's larger in size, which is actually helpful for resolution. And it's nice and big. It fits right on top of the plastic case there. And you just have to adjust this till it's basically perfectly level. And in this case, it's so close that like actually loosening and retightening would be like gross levels of change. We need very fine. So physically just kind of moving it around is enough to get it where it needs to be. And then you very, very carefully remove this like this, put it down, and then you're ready to go. And the next thing you're going to do is actually take a measurement of the system and check where it places the speakers. And I'll just mention it can be a little tricky because sometimes the center channel is like just right, but the left is a little bit too far to one side versus the right. And you'll be like, I don't understand what I did wrong. Do I need to rotate it? Well, no, if you rotate it, everything shifts around. More than likely, the microphone is physically placed in the wrong place. In a scenario like that, it's too far to one side, but aimed at the center. So the center ended up being correct, but the left and the right speakers ended up being incorrect. So you need to actually, what I do is using a laser measure, I measure the distance between the center channel and one of the walls, and then I measure the distance between the microphone and one of the walls, the same wall, to make sure that they need to be like within basically a 1/4 inch of each other kind of a thing, because if they are off, what happens is that, like I said, it shifts the speakers. The other thing that can happen is that the LCRs are basically right, but they're actually different elevations. And you'll say to yourself, like, I know they're not. I put them in the right place. What happened? Well, you saw I was leveling it. If it's out of level at all, even like a degree, think of the speakers as existing in a hemisphere around this microphone. You shifted everything, and so everything else, the surround speakers now are all going to be wrong, even though the left-right speaker was correct. So getting that leveling and that aiming is critical. If you got to redo that first measurement 10 times, redo the first measurement 10 times until it's correct, because that first measurement is really critical to the placement of the speakers, the level matching, the distance, and it's worth making sure it's correct. If it's a little off, it doesn't really screw anything up, but I think it's good practice to learn how to get that right. Once you have that right, the rest of the measurements are not quite as critical, but for waveforming, you do need specific locations. So we'll go ahead and take this first measurement, and then we're going to go back and do the other measurements, and I'll show you how that's done. So I've gone ahead and moved the microphone now to the left position from the RSP. So what's going to happen with a waveforming setup, and it's basically the first steps of any optimizer setup you would do with Trinnov, is you're going to take a series of measurements that are going to utilize all of the speakers, and they're going to fall within your critical listening zone where you wanted to make corrections. You don't want them to be too close together. My recommendation is going to be about 2 to 2.5 feet apart minimum. So if you know, sometimes you might think like, well, I only want it to be good here, so I'm going to take like 10 measurements right here. You're going to oversample this space, so that's not a great idea. The better thing to do is, if you really want to try to focus here, so you take this point, if you really want to get tight, maybe 18 inches, but that's as much as I would do. You measure over, you measure back, you measure forward that amount, and you could take a series of measurements here that you would use. I'm actually going to go ahead and include these, and I'll look at them. So that's another part of it, is you want to validate the measurement. So I'm going to take this measurement now here, and then I'm going to move it over here, take another measurement. Now, for my purposes, I might take a few more measurements in the system that would include all the speakers, but I don't actually want to correct for the response back there in the mids and highs. I do want to correct for the response in the bass, and we need a lot more bass samples of the room than we do mid-high samples of the room. So I'll probably take another measurement back here and another measurement forward on the seat, but that's going to be about it for the ones that are included in the all speaker measurements and included in the optimizer correction. So I am going to try to focus it around this front seat area and not worry about that area as much. Okay, so we've recorded already this, or measured I should say, this. So now we're going to move it over. I'm using this screwdriver as a weight because the microphone is heavy and tipping over. So we're going to put it like this. So what you can see again, we got the RSP, or the MLP, whatever you want to call it, the right of that position, well, left of that position when you're sitting this way, right? It was right the other way. And then now we're moving it to the right of the RSP position for the next measurement. So these are all being included in the full set of measurements. Okay, so I'm now placing the microphone in the back middle between the rows of seats. This is where we're going to start to do the fill-in bass only measurements. So this is going to go much quicker. The other one had to do all the channels in the system. Now we're doing only the subwoofers, which is 4 channels. So it's just going to do left front, left rear, right rear, move the mic, repeat, and you just keep doing that until you've gotten a good sampling. You really need about 12 total measurement positions to get a pretty decent sampling. You could try less, but it'll sometimes give you results that say it's good, but it's not really that good. So keep that in mind. The more measurement positions you have, the worse the end result could end up looking, but it's actually because you're asking it to provide better results over a larger measurement area. For those of you who are thinking, Matt, you've got a light and a weird projector stand thing like in the way of your microphone, doesn't that screw it up? Remember, we're doing bass only right now, so no, it has no effect. Might rattle. just using a rubber isolator foot to balance this out. That's too much. All right. So the distance between the microphone and this rear wall needs to be about 1 meter. And this is actually pretty critical. If this distance between this microphone and this wall is too great, it's going to end up giving you bad results. So I'm going to push this towards the edge of the seat. You might say, well, what are we doing then to correct this? It'll still correct this, but the microphone's measurement can't be back here. It's too close to that wall. So you need to make sure with waveforming, you're never measuring right up against the back wall like that. So one of the things I forgot to mention that's really critical, and I just did it when I was done with the measurements, is that after it's measured all the speakers, you need to, every 5 to 10 measurements, I would say 5 is the right number. Every 5 measurements, you should compute, save to your preset, and then keep going. The reason is that it's holding all those measurements in memory, and the size of them is much larger than it used to be. So and you're doing a lot more measurement points. So when you're doing 12 plus measurement points, you can quickly run into a position where the thing runs out of memory. You can end up losing everything you did because the unit basically shuts down or locks up. So make sure every 5 measurements you compute and save. It's gotten better. They've made some updates to help it handle that stuff better so that it's not as big of an issue as it used to be. It used to be like an absolute requirement, but I have still had these lock up on me and require this. It's more true of the Amplitude 16, it seems, than the 32, I believe, because it has less memory. So all the measurements I'm taking right now are roughly the same height above the chair, but keep in mind I'm actually varying the height because of the riser. The other thing to keep in mind is that I'm going to take another set of measurements at a higher height in the future for the front row. So for the rest of these measurements, we're going to start moving the microphones now into positions you guys probably would find odd if you think of it in a traditional sense. But remember that what we're doing for waveforming is sampling the wavefront in key positions around the room. So the next set of measurements I'm going to do are actually outside of the chairs along the aisle. We still need to be 1 meter to the wall. So no measurement can be pushed closer than 1 meter to the wall. So now that we're moving towards the side walls, we have to make sure that we're 1 meter from the back wall and 1 meter to the side wall. Alright, so now we're starting to do some of the height measurements. You can see the microphone's like as tall as I am at this point, which may seem crazy, but remember, we're sampling the wavefront as it goes across the room. Okay, so I've now finished everything. I've saved it. Really the best way to look at this is we've done the first step in calibrating the system. We haven't actually calibrated it yet. So we need to go back here and just take a look. So we've got, as you can see, we've got all the positions. There's 15 total measurements I did. They all are calibrated. We've got 1, 2, 3, 5 that are not sub-only. They include everything, and then the rest contain sub-only. If we look at the positions and we look here, we can see that the positions came out, roughly correct. A little bit of twisting here we can see between the left surround and the right surround, which I mentioned before. I mean, the fact that this is correct and this is not correct suggests that it's possibly related to some positional issues, or what I actually know what it is. There were studs in the wall and the speakers are positioned slightly differently. So we can actually go here and look at that. We have left surround, right surround. We have distance, and you can see it's 2.52 meters versus 2.45 meters. So not a big deal. The elevation difference, I mean, these should all be the same. The fact that they're not, probably, even though my bubble level showed it to be right, it maybe wasn't perfect. Or again, speakers may not be in exactly perfectly the right position. It doesn't take much for this to come off. So you're a little bit off in the tilting of the microphone, a little bit off in the mounting, and you've got some what look like big differences. None of these are actually meaningful, though. That's not a big deal. And then the azimuth here, you can see, so 20.9 versus 21.9, not a big deal there, but 90.1 and 84.7, that's part of where we're seeing that shift that I was showing between the left and the right surround. Some of that's related to the fact that they're not mounted exactly in the same position, but they're close. And you could play around with it to try to get it better. Again, not actually going to affect much in the way that it all works. The delays are still, I mean, look at that. The delay is 7.35 versus 7.15. You're not going to probably hear that. Okay, so that looks right. Looking here, everything looks about right as well. Elevations seem pretty consistent. So we're then going to go over to the settings. So you have to have it in amplitude plus phase if you're going to be doing waveforming. And we haven't even turned that on yet, but I'm going to go ahead and play with some things here first. So you've got the quantity of early reflections. You can go down to much smaller numbers. This is going to affect imaging. My recommendation actually is to play with this and come up with a number that you like and make that one of your settings. Change it to another one that you like. I say like, I mean, you got to listen to these. Just try different settings. Listen to it. There's a quicker way to cycle through this I can show you. Resolution of early response. You know, some people like to have it be very low resolution. Some people like a little bit more. We're going to do this just as the first basic one. We're not going to do any positional remapping. There are some small errors that you saw, and it would be able to fix those, but I tend to find that this doesn't make any meaningful improvements that I like. It kind of ranges between not audible and actually creating artifacts I don't like. So I'm going to leave it off, but you can play with it. You might like it. I have had situations where this actually does some nice, helpful things, just not in my own room. So under advanced settings, you're going to leave all this alone. You don't need to touch it. This is stuff you would have played with during the measurement phase. Don't need to touch it now. Here, I wouldn't worry about this right now either. Over here, I also don't know that I would worry too much. If you feel like the system is overcompensating, you know, kind of overcorrecting, you can reduce the number of IIR filters that it uses. That's the infinite impulse response. So that's going to be like shell filters, PEQ filters, that kind of a thing. The maximum frequency, so I typically prefer to keep this type of correction below 150 hertz. I'm okay with 22 though. The minimum frequency, we're going to let it do automatic. You can change it like that. Like if you know your subwoofers have good, in fact, let's go ahead and do that. So if you know your subwoofers have good output down really low, it may auto detect a number that's not low enough. So this kind of allows it to deal with that. Room smoothing method, this is another one of those, there isn't a right and a wrong. They just work a little bit differently in how it smooths. And so you may want to try squared modulus instead of modulus and see what happens. It's one of those, like make a setting that's, I would even save it, like a preset called modulus, another one called squared modulus, see what happens. All right, so then over here under level alignment settings, if your speakers have a lot of low frequency content, that you think is causing some level issues and you're not getting the right results, you can try DBA instead of DBC. I would say leave it like this for now, look at what the results look like, and then kind of go from there. But I'm going to change that. I have a reason for it. Subwoofer low pass filter, I would ignore that. It doesn't really matter for what you're doing. Decimation settings, I would also ignore. It's not something you probably need to really worry about too much for now. And then advanced FIR settings, I would actually say try the pre-ringing reduction on and off and see what you think. Some people feel that the effect is inaudible or even is creating more harm than good. And then limiter used during inversion, none. You know, you can also have default, your choice. So we're actually going to go to default on that one, and then you hit apply settings. This is important. Remember too, when you hit the apply settings, it's processing everything. It's not saving it. You still need to go into the preset and save it. So you can see it's making some changes. At this point we can move over. So you see this right here. This is something I put in because of an error in the response. I've got kind of a multiple approach way to fix this, but what's happening, best I can tell, I think we're still trying to figure this out with certainty, is that the microphone, when it's pointed up, is rolling off the high frequencies, because even quarter-inch capsules are not perfectly omnidirectional. And the higher in frequency you get, the more it rolls off. So let me show you why. And you might say to me, well, Matt, I don't know that you're right. I think that there's a response problem with the speaker because I've seen this. So see this right here? That big peak at 10 kilohertz and then that roll off, it's not real. For some odd reason, this system is picking that up and showing it, and it shows it not 100% of the time, but like 85, 90% of the time that it measures, especially Perlisten speakers, it shows this peak in the response like this. We know it's not real for a couple of reasons. I measured the response of the speakers using my quarter-inch lab-grade microphone. In fact, I used 3 different quarter-inch capsules aimed at the speaker at the RSP, and it's dead flat through here. It does not show that. It doesn't show the roll-off that this is showing, and it doesn't show that peak. I have measured this. I've also looked at the clipple measurements that were taken off of the S7Is. They don't show it. They're dead flat. I've checked with the guys from Perlisten. They don't see this. It's some sort of an error. And so I fixed it in a couple ways. One was that I partially recreated that error here in the response in order to reduce the amount of correction it's trying to do there. The other thing I did was in the excursion curve. And we're actually going to lower this more. Well, it's, yeah. So we are currently on the left speaker, so we're going to move, we're not going to let it do any more, but we're going to move that back here. Oh, it's not working. We need to add a point. Let's try that. Oh, goodness, don't do what I'm doing. All right, we're going to delete that point. There we go. I left it in add a point instead of move point mode, and it did this. But this is what I wanted to show you. So see this right here? Now it's not doing any correction up that high. We don't want it to. So some correction down here, not a big deal. But up that high, oop, did not mean to do that because I deleted those points again. All right. Now we're going to go back to move point. This is how you're supposed to do it. You know, 5 dB is okay. Something like that. That's not a big deal. And you may want to move this back. Like I'm actually going to move this back right around here for now. And then you need to make sure, so we've got link all. Go through all and make sure that those are all done. It's going to change it when we get to subwoofer. So you can see what it's doing with the tops. There's no confidence in the low frequency response for these tops. And it's interesting because they're not really that different from the other speakers. But yeah, that's what we're getting. There's the subs. You can see no confidence in the high frequencies. We wouldn't expect that. But one of the interesting things here is that if we go back, here, let me go all the way back to the first one. Really, this what we should do is link all but subs. Then go to the subwoofer. There we go. This, we could do a little higher, right? Like we'd be okay with a little bit more correction. So we can go back here and say, oh, what did it? I hit the wrong one. There we go. So here we're at 8 dB. So go to the next one and take it down to around 8 dB. This is not super critical that you get this exact. Then we go over to this one. All right. Oops, went too far. All right, 8 dB. Apply changes. All right, so we're going to go back over here and save this again. You don't want to move too quickly, so one of the issues you can have if you keep pushing buttons too quickly is you will lock it up at some point. Let's look at these graphs. I showed you this before, and you can see that, remember, this is just a 10 dB, plus or minus 10 dB window, so we're talking about very little here. So this is pretty good, and this, as I said, is just artificial garbage. It's not real, and we don't really need to worry about that. One of the things I want to show you, it's a problem in my system, and the Trinnov actually highlights it pretty well. So this is that center seat, and you can see that the left, right, and center speakers have basically identical responses. There's no real difference, slight difference in the peak here that's related to the axis. Difference in the bass here, not a big concern. If we look at this second position, that's the left of center, notice that the levels are different now. So they're pretty close here, but when we get into the high frequencies, they start to spread out. So what's causing that spread out? It actually has to do with the directivity of the speaker. We're basically so far off axis when we're in that left seat, given my seating positions, that you're starting to see the effects of the directivity of the speaker. One of the things that would actually help with this would have been, so again, if we look at the first position, they're like on top of each other. Had I aimed the speakers in more of a almost cross-firing like way, we might have been able to resolve this so that we would get more consistency in the levels at these other positions. Because if we look here, we see the same thing. This one is the position that's actually in the front of center. We see it's the same response. Behind the center position, same response. It's really just these side ones where things get goofy. And then you can see once we get to this, it's sub only, so we don't need to worry about that. So let's go ahead and look at something else. I'm going to keep the left position up, and then we're going to do the left side surround. So it doesn't look identical, but you can see that the left side surround, the right side surround, the left top middle, right top middle, they're all showing that weird peaking in the response. But outside of that, we're seeing that it looks pretty similar to the left speaker. So I'm going to go ahead and turn these off again and just show you this. These look pretty similar, like they have a pretty similar response. That wasn't true in my last system. Here's the rear ones, a little bit of a high frequency error that we're starting to see. I actually intentionally aimed them a little bit off, which may have caused some of that, but overall not bad. Oh, and this is the fifth position actually. Let's look, this is what we should have been looking at all along. So if we look at these, we can see the green one is the response of the left speaker, and then these others are the other speakers, with the left rear being the most often the high frequencies. But again, given the aiming and the position off axis, that makes sense. And then we can look at the right speaker, and we can look at the right side surround here, and then we can look at, so that's what that looks like, remember. Then we can look at the right rear surround, the right top front, very similar response. Anyway, so other than some slight differences above basically 7-8 kilohertz, they're pretty similar to each other, which is normal room effects, easily correctable in this region. So they kind of lie on top of each other, looks pretty good. Okay, so this all looks fine. Nothing really worrisome here. Let's look at this. Pretty ugly. We're going to have to correct for that. Lots of spatial variance too. Look at that. Very, very ugly response all around. So we have to get into waveforming now. So if we go over here, we don't have bass management on. We need to turn that on. And we're going to go ahead and select all 80 hertz. I actually think is a good starting point for this stuff, and I wouldn't probably, meant to select all the subwoofers. It needs to know that. Remember, you have to have 4 subwoofers for waveforming. All right, and then we're going to go to waveforming settings, waveforming, yes. That distance is preset. All right, I said it earlier, but that is correct. That's the distance. Max control, you probably should do medium for now. And this should be probably medium. That's where you want to start. I would not use pressurization mode initially. I would do everything else. Correction regulation you should turn on. It's a good idea. And then we're going to hit apply, and it's going to go through and compute. So you got to let it do its compute. Once it computes, we need to actually save the preset and then investigate. So one of the problems I'll just mention when you look at the waveforming graphs is that all of the positions that had all of the speakers in it are going to not show up. Only the first RSP one does. Only the other sub positions do. But there's a pruning process we should be going through. So we're going to go over here. We're going to go to preset. We're going to save this. All right, going back to the main screen, back to here, and we need to open a new window, and we need to get rid of the VNC and log in again. We're going to go over here and we're going to go to the graphs. So there's our MLP. Wow, that looks good. Well, that's not looking so good. So some of those other positions are starting to look way off. In fact, all the other positions are looking way off from that one. So something didn't go right here. We've got a problem. This is not good. I'm actually going to have to redo this. If we look at the before, they're all on top of each other. And if we look at the after, they're all on top of each other except for the MLP. These are way different from each other. If we look over here at the time frequency metric, that looks pretty good compared to the before. Yeah, look at that. So see, that's a much better after. If we look at the metrics, we see a significant improvement actually. But this doesn't look good to me. All of these are sitting low, this one's sitting high. That means that the base level is very different at these other positions. So we'll need to check and figure out what happened. And it could have been any number of things that went wrong. There might be some settings that are off. So this is a good example of things not going well. Hard to say why it did this. Going back to the metrics, I'm just going to show you some things here while we're here. So notice we're level 3, but we're almost just at level 4. We're plus or minus 2.1 dB. Most of the variance is here in the low bass, and we actually can fix that if we want, but it could affect the sound. We can change this to max. That's going to increase decay control. So think of this as making the response, in a sense, almost artificially even cleaner and tighter. I say artificially because this is the active cancellation that's doing it. So if you go the other direction, if you go to minimum, you're going to get more of a sound that's kind of consistent with the way it might have been had you not used waveforming. Just touching level 4 now. And the thing is, we can play around with this. Let's try setting that to minimum. So we're going to let it just go hog wild. Well, that actually didn't make it better. So letting it do that made this a little tighter, but loosened that up a bit and didn't get us farther up here. But basically you can play with it. So you could also do max and see what happens there. So let's just try that. And that made it worse, you can see. Although in many ways, even though it is technically worse, I think that the decay control is a little bit better. But you get the point. And it's a huge improvement from where it was, other than we've got this, oops, here we go, so what I wanted to look at. We've got this weird issue that we need to look at. Like, that's just not the way we want it to be. And it's hard to tell what happened. I'll tell you what it could be. I actually started the calibration yesterday, turned everything off, turned it back on, and restarted today. You really should do the measurements all right in a row, not across multiple days. I have a feeling something changed between those 2 days, and that's what caused this. But I think this is actually educational, which is to show you how to evaluate this. The one interesting thing is, look at that response. And if I measured it now with RAW, you'll see it's pretty close to this at the RSP. It's really interesting how much better it makes the response compared to before for the individual subs. Okay, so in the earlier part of the video, I went and showed you how I did the bass management, the waveforming, I did my calculations, I went ahead and hit apply, and we went to the waveforming graph and I said, oh, that doesn't look right. So let's look at this again. So you can see the nice flat response that we've got from roughly 100 hertz down to 20 hertz, a little bit of roll off there, and all that could be played with in the calibration curve and things like that. So for now, don't worry about that. But then what you saw when I added this, all of a sudden, the next measurement was like way, way down in level, which didn't make any sense. So you can see that that's not true anymore. So this different measurement position is actually lying right on top of it. So you can see what the variance looks like. So we're going to do select all. There's a little bit, obviously, and we expect there to be some. Some of these measurements, remember, because there was 15 total, but you're not seeing all of them here. These are measurements that were out at the perimeter of the room. They're pretty extreme. But if we do all of them, we see it still falls within a pretty good grouping, such that if we go over to the metrics, we can see that we're hitting plus or minus 1.89 dB, and we're falling within the level 4 grouping. So that is actually with, if we look at the settings, medium settings. If we go to stronger settings, it actually gets better. So we can see this looks quite a bit better. The decay time is much improved. The time frequency information, so this is showing us after. Let's look at before. So here you can see the before. Look at how far out this green area goes. The energy is extending quite far, more so at low frequencies, but across the board, right? And we go to the after, and you can see that it really tightens that up. So we're getting quite an improvement. And the other thing to keep in mind here, look at this shift that took place. So you got to keep that in mind. Here, the energy actually is extending a little bit closer to 0. Here, everything shifted over a little bit. So it is tighter, and it's even tighter than it looks because there's a little bit of delay that's being inserted in there. So if we go to these metrics, like I said, looks really good. If we were to go to max and min here, this should be the strongest. It doesn't always, but it should give the best result, but it's going to not necessarily sound the best because this is also like the most artificially tightened up, if you will. It also could be putting too much stress on the subwoofers in some cases. So those rear subwoofers, if they're not identical to the front subwoofers, may not be able to keep up with the front. Mine are not and probably can't. So this may not be a good setting. But you can see now we're plus or minus 1.52 dB. This is even tighter here. If we look over here, technically this looks a little tighter yet, but it's hard to see at that point because it's not that big of an improvement. And then amplitude-wise, if we select all, you can see that this is tightened up quite a bit. So it looks better. I probably wouldn't keep it this way though, because like I said, I think this is too much. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the medium decay control. We're gonna go ahead and try low. Now, you know what, actually, let's just do medium, apply, which is what we did before. I'm gonna go save that, and we're gonna make new presets. That's the better way to handle it. So if we go back over here, we need to save that. I called it new 2.0 because new had everything set up correctly, but and we need to clear it because it's screwed up. The problem with the new 2.0 was that new 2.0, or I'm sorry, the new one was the measurements were bad, which was my fault. So now we're going to do new max control, for instance. Right? And we're going to save that over here. And then we're going to go back to the main screen again. We're going to go over the waveforming settings. We're going to go to max. We're going to go back to the advanced. We're going to go to minimum limiter. And for those that don't know, remember you've got information that explains it all here. So it says that affects the filter's strength. Higher values produce filters that are less complex. This parameter can be used to control the aggressiveness of the filters to prevent overcorrection, and it's for advanced users only. I'm showing you how to do this. They're correct. You should probably leave this on medium and not worry about it. But I just want to show you how you can set up some extremes just to listen to it. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Remember, this one gave the tightest response. And keep in mind when you do this, because the filters are more complex and more intense, there is a chance of it overloading those rear subs. So you need to make sure that you're using good subwoofers. If you're using DIY subwoofers with no limiters, just understand you may be pushing your subs to the limits. Oops. So that actually would show up over here. What did I do? Oh, I know what I did. Yeah, here we go. So now we see it's nice and tight. We've got the control up there. So if we go back to here, we've got extra windows open. We now have max control. So now we can do max control infra, for instance. Because remember, it was rolling off at 20 hertz. So we're going to make an infra mode. And let me show you the best way to handle that. Keep in mind, there's two ways I think to do this that work well, but we're going to show you one that's not a bad idea. If you've got pretty good deep bass already, you can overload your subs. So you do got to keep that in mind when you're doing this. So if we go back over here to our settings, and we go over to target curve, if we, let me think about the best way to do this. So we're going to go down to the 10 hertz one, and we're going to raise that up to 5. This is a very mild curve as it stands, right? You guys know that. So we've got it at 5. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a ramp. So get this to like 4.8 or 9, something like that. I got it 4.8, right? Get this up to, we're going to get a nice gentle ramp where we're just a fraction of a dB below. There we go. So I'll get this to like 4.3, see what that looks like. Nope, that didn't work. No, it's not really working. I think that's working better. All right, you can see the shape I'm going for though. It's just a ramp shape. So you want to adjust these. If you've never noticed before, that gives you the frequency in dBs down here. Try to keep it smooth. All right, so now we have something like this, and you're gonna have to save this. So we're gonna go here, new target, call it infra. And enter. All right. So link all, load infra, and then it should be the same across the board, but when we get to the subs, it may not be. And then you just have to load it again. Whoa. All right. So see how this got all goofy on us? So we need to go and load infra. That was probably some other curve I had. Yeah, so this one's not showing up correctly. So we're going to load infra. And then the rest should all be the same. They are. And so we're going to apply those changes. Remember that this curve up here is used to compensate for some correction that I don't want it to be doing. One of these days we'll figure out what's really going on. We go back to the preset and we save that. Oh, looks like it's saved okay. And then here we're going to do an audio file one. Okay. So instead of new max control, we're going to call it audio file. We're going to say, for the sake of argument, that your audio file one is going to keep the same target curve because I don't want to waste time on that. All right, so we have a new audio file one in addition to these. Go back over to these settings. And I mentioned to you before that in the main menu, there's this stuff. So you could extend this out to 8 cycles. And that would be offering correction for an awful lot of the early reflections. The other one's actually 5 is already kind of in the audiophile mode, if you will. It's not really correct to say that, but you get the idea. And then, there we go. So there's nothing here that I think needs to be changed, to be honest with you. You could increase the number of IIR filters that it uses for more. But what you can do is you can kind of neuter its ability to touch the response of the system. And you do that over in the excursion curve. So if we go back here, okay, so we're going to link all. Link all but sub. There we go. Okay. We're going to put this at 0. So it can't do any correction. We're going to add some points around 200 hertz to near it. We're going to move these points. You can see I don't even need those points. And we're going to leave this, actually, and we're going to leave this. Because in the base, it's good to do some correction, but up here, we're going to not allow it to do so much. And then we're going to go through and check that it took that across everything but the subwoofers. And so for the subwoofers, you can see here, nothing's really changed here. These are the same, and that's fine. That's what we want. We're going to apply those changes. And we're going to save it to the preset again. So this audiophile mode, which keep in mind, like you should be listening to all of this stuff and making decisions, but I just want to kind of show you this. It's at this point, it's no longer making any real corrections. Ooh, it didn't like that. What did we do? It's still going. I didn't realize that. And keep in mind, in scenarios like this where I may have been moving too fast and not realized, it may have locked up and we'll have to go over again. That happens sometimes. It's an unfortunate reality of a processor that's as capable as this, is that you do have to sometimes bear with its little eccentricities. Okay, we are back now. I did lock it up. Oops. And it was just from moving too quickly and not realizing it was doing something. So like I said, you do have to be careful with that. So I've gone ahead and changed the excursion curve to prevent it from doing anything. And if we look at the graphs, you can see it's really not doing anything anymore. It's not correcting the response up here. It's leaving it as is. And that's what we want, because we want to hear the speaker as is. As I mentioned, this is an error. This is not what the response looks like. It's just what it's picking up. So it's all the better that we're not actually correcting it. I actually, in this particular case, I'm looking at the tops and the surround. So we can do here right, top, front, and right surround, because they're kind of near each other. And let's just take a look at this and just see. So we're getting a little bit more bass output, probably from some wall gain or something on the right side surround, and a little bit less with the tops. And so you want to look at this and see, like, does that kind of match what you'd expect? Here you can see it's adding a bunch of boost here, but remember it's crossing that over. So even though it's trying to flatten it out to 20 hertz, it's not going to really do that. You could go in and adjust the target curve, the excursion curve, to prevent it from adding bass to the side surrounds, but it's all getting filtered out, so it's really not a big deal to do that. So this kind of gives you a sense of what the actual correction looks like here, and you can see it's not doing anything up there. If you did want to push it a little bit, 'cause sometimes people want a little bit more correction, what you can do is push this up to 500 hertz, like this. Oops, wrong thing. Sorry, so this stays here. This is, no, stay there. There we go. This is the one we want to move to here. And then you can just do a little bit, just like that. Oh, I did not mean to lower that much. Sorry. So at this point, and then we can link all to make sure, puts all of them. That should have actually been link all but sub. Now we have to go through. Well, let's apply that. And remember the area where you're seeing it down here kind of like I can't adjust this, right? That's because it's saying it doesn't have enough confidence to apply any sort of correction there. It's not really sure that that's not just noise. Probably because the level was so low, it is just noise. So we're going to go to the subwoofers now just to check them because I'm going to mess that up. Here we go. So for the subwoofers, we actually can, because they're not linked right now, you can delete out these modes. Here, this stuff. Okay. And then we can move the points and we can go back to allowing this to have more correction. I mean, if you've got the headroom, you could do 10 dB. If you don't, maybe do 6. It's probably a more reasonable number for most people. For some, you're not even going to have the headroom for 6, so do keep that in mind. And then we will go to the next one. We've got the same issue, so we're going to delete these out. We're going to take this to 6 again. Oops. 6. Got a little aggressive. There we go. Delete out. All right. The next one, delete. Well, let me remove it, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to move this up to 6. Apply the changes again. Oh, I meant to delete that. All right, we have to do that and then apply it. Again, none of this matters. It's not actually going to be using this in the correction area. It's just like these points don't matter, but no reason to neuter it if it can actually use it in some way. There we go. Apply that now. And now we've got the ability for it to do more corrections to the bass. So while it's doing this, I'll just mention the next thing, of course, you have to do is remember to save to the presets. None of this tells us that the system sounds good. Like we have no idea how the system sounds without going and listening. So you're going to have to go and listen to it, you know, and I wanted to show you a way of doing that. So I'm going to get the preset saved and then I'm going to go into the setup and show you this trick. Many of you might already know it. It's not that big of a trick. So it's saving. We are good. So here, see this light mode? If you click light mode and leave that on for your listening test, you can switch through the presets much more quickly and it's easier. It doesn't have to process when you switch between them. So see, we have it on light mode now. So if I go here, see how quick that was? Really quick. So we're able to switch between the presets to listen to them more quickly, to hear the differences that they make. So, okay, everything I just showed you, I can turn this off because we don't want to read only for the next step. Everything I just showed you is sort of the basics of how to calibrate within the optimizer, right? And so that was making changes here. You can change the target curve and get different response shape. Let's just say though you start to do your REW measurements, your whatever it is you're using to do confirmation measurements, and you do your confirmation measurements. Hopefully you're being smart and doing more than one. You're actually doing like a spatial average of the listening area and a few other positions. And you realize that there's some stuff you don't like. I actually had some stuff in here because I do some preempting in my fixes. So I'm sure you all know this is where you do the PEQ. So you go in here. So I have a shell filter that I use to compensate for the roll off from the screen. So I've applied that to compensate for that. This works pretty well, but let's just say that there's some stuff going on I don't like, right? So this is where, of course, you add that. And so I won't do that until I get to a point where I'm confident in my listening test that it needs it. And I haven't done the listening test yet, but I just wanted to show you. So this is where you would add it. You had your peak notch filter or your shelving filters. Peak notch is really what we're going to care about for this. And of course, this is all assuming that you're using Optimizer. You can do a full manual calibration. If you do a full manual calibration, then you don't use most of these settings. And you're going to actually do most of your setup over here. So EQ is done here, and your bass management is done here. And then from there, you just kind of fine tune it to get it to where you want it. So hopefully this is helpful. I think the other thing that I'm not set up right this moment to do this. So I'm going to do maybe another one where I show you this, but over here, where am I trying to show this? It's not here. Is it under processor? No. Here. There we go. Master. Under master, under processor, you have master level not stored in preset, level display offset not stored in preset, level offset when correction is on, blah, 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 right? And all of this serves different purposes, but you can use, this is the section where you can actually make adjustments to it to change the volume level for if you want to set it against a reference level. So I'm not set up to do that right now, but I can show you how to do that later. Hopefully this is a helpful video. It's sort of a quick and dirty how you do a waveforming optimization. So as you saw, it's sort of a standard optimizer setup. There's some settings you go through here, calibration, at least 12. I have 15 in this one. As I already went through, you check your positions, make sure that all of that is correct and where it's supposed to be. Check your summary to make sure everything here looks good. So you'll go through each of those to make sure they seem reasonable. And then once that's all said and done, you go back to the main screen, you go over to the bass management, you go to your waveforming, you turn that on, and we are in the wrong screen for this, but if we go over here, we can check our graphs. What did I do? Well, this is not right. It's missing all of them. Let's go back over here really quick. Oh, because it's on light mode. How did I end up on light mode? Is it still showing itself on light? It is. What did I do? Okay, sorry about that. We're back again. I apparently need to just select another preset with the light mode off. So we have light mode is off right now. We go over to optimizer. Everything is showing up the way it should. It's not showing up as light anymore. We have our speaker positions. They are where they should be. Everything's looking pretty good there. So then we go, like I said, you go back over here, and we're going to do it over here actually. We check it out and everything looks pretty good and we're happy with that. Actually, while we're doing this, this is not set the way I would want it for an audiophile system. So I would probably go to low on this and medium here. Remember I said probably you shouldn't be touching this, but if you want to just play with it, see what it does, you can. The reason why you shouldn't be touching it is you could overload the subs if you apply an overly aggressive filter. It also may not sound good. I mean, just because it measures well or looks better. So I'm going to do this as my audiophile mode, and I'm going to go listen after this. And then once I'm done listening, I'm going to make some decisions about how I want to further fine-tune the system for each of those presets. So remember now it looks a little bit worse than it did. If we go to the metrics, we're actually, you can see we've degraded it quite a bit with this particular level. We're down to level 3, but I don't care because it still measures really well. I mean, remember, oops, over here, that still looks good, right? I don't have a problem with that. So we're going to go over here to this. I'm going to go over to the preset, and I'm going to save this in my audiophile mode. So I've got the other ones that are more aggressive. They're going to give me a better response across all the seats, and I've got this audiophile mode, which is really the least aggressive of them. You know, if we go over to the target curve, we've got that target curve in there.
excursion curve that we basically have said don't do anything. I mean, just to make clear for those who are wondering, like this is meaningless now. Like this is, I'm leaving it in there because I don't feel like I'm taking it out, but it's not doing it. It's completely been removed from it. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful and you kind of get a sense of how to do the waveforming setup. And like I said, I'm going to go listen now and we'll see what we think.